Hey, I'm James from Smoking Out Barbecue, and can we cook a perfect Texas-style brisket on a Kamado grill in 8 hours or less? That is the challenge that I've unwittingly backed myself into a near impossible corner, as today our bus family camping trip leaves at 5 o'clock sharp. So I need to get this brisket done in 8 hours or risk potentially having to leave it behind for a neighbor. Maybe they get dinner and I won't. So let me tell you the game plan on how I plan to cook what I think will be a perfect Texas style smoked brisket on a Kamado style grill in 8 hours or less. So over the years, I've already validated a couple things. So let's start with what we know before what we don't know, which is if all this can come together and meet my 8-hour deliverable at the risk of losing the brisket. So first, hotter and faster taste better. I did a series, whether it was ribs or brisket or pulled pork, and each of those scenarios, the hotter and faster temperatures in a Kamado style grill tasted better, looked better, and cooked in less time. So that was all the positive. But in each of those examples, the hotter the temperature when we're managing our fire directly under our food, we increase the risk of burning the bottom. And that has spawned a whole bunch of things over the years, from double indirect to using the foil boat. But let's lock in. Hotter and faster taste better. A year ago, I discovered, you see it installed here, the Dojo makes an amazing smoking accessory. This is not what it's designed for. It's in a pizza accessory, but kind of like a miniature offset where we've got air coming in one side, sort of looping up and over in a rainbow pattern before it exits out the front of the pizza accessory. This is what is happening inside of my larger offset smokers. And using an aeronometer last year, I was able to measure and confirm against something like the slow roller or the stock deflector plates over a 4x improvement in convection airflow. And convection airflow is one of the 3 heat signatures that we have at our disposal, whether it's convection airflow, the radiant stored energy in the dome, or it's the conduction energy of the food sitting on a hot surface. It's these 3 properties that determine the cook time, as well as some of the attributes of our food, whether it's smoky or we're not getting a good smoke ring or things like that, that are often compared to an offset smoker. Convection airflow is one of the not strong suits of a Kamado style grill, where it's the absolute strong suit of something like an offset smoker. So I know not only that hotter and faster tastes better, but also that the airflow can be 4x stronger, and I can burn full wood splits in my Kickash can using something like the Dojo accessory. I've also learned from Cooper at Bar A Barbecue that they use this notion of cold smoking before transitioning to hot smoking. This is something that he shared in an interview with a friend, Al from Eat More Vegans, who visited Cooper in person and walked through a little bit of their process. And he shared not only is cold smoking moving to hot smoking paramount to how they turn out great results, they also use a simplified seasoning. So the Fiesta Season It All salt along with coarse black pepper. So I'm gonna try a Bar A Barbecue style Texas seam. I already done this with 6 pork shoulders on my Kamado Joe Big Joe Series 3, where I did a cold smoke and then moved into a hot smoke, and it hands down turned out the best pulled pork I've ever done on a Kamado style grill. So that is absolutely gonna make the cut for what I try and apply to today. So how did I get myself in this crazy predicament in the first place? Well, let's back up. So our game plan, as I mentioned, is to leave today 5 o'clock sharp, which means I need to have the brisket done at 3. So that's where the 8 hours in terms of a useful window comes in for getting the brisket. But starting yesterday, our plan was to do a pulled pork, which is actually just finished on the other grill, when we got the last minute call. Seconds before Costco was closed, I was able to go pick up our brisket to add a brisket to our cook. And so that is what has inspired this. Can we recreate with very little prep and intervention and a very, very tight timeline? Gone are the 14, 15, 18-hour brisket cooks. We don't have time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Unless I was to do this all night. But I hear in comments all the time that many of you would like to avoid the all-night cook because you're not able to deal with things that might come up, including pooling on your brisket that's robbing seasoning, or anything else like that that can go sideways in the middle of the night. So I wanted to challenge myself with this common question of, what if I want to do a same-day brisket? How do I get the absolute best results? So starting yesterday, let me walk you through the prep. Since we got the brisket last minute with seasoning, I kept things very simple. Cooper in his video mentioned that all they use at Bar A Barbecue on their large cuts of beef, like beef ribs and or brisket, is something like this Fiesta Season It All seasoning salt, which, reading the ingredients, is very similar to things that I would use in my rub. So we've got salt, paprika, rice flour, don't have that, spices, don't to specify, sugar, monosodium glutamate, garlic, as well as onion, both of which those are in my homemade rub recipe. So there's a lot of similar things in there, mostly replicating what is in Lowry's, which I cut with Diamond Kosher Crystal Salt. The only other thing that Cooper mentioned is depending on the color of the bark that they're going for, they go heavier or lighter on the black pepper. So a lighter pepper application is going to be more of a mahogany color. Going a little bit heavier is going to give us that dark signature Texas bark. So borrowing a page from Cooper's Barbecue, I've gone for first applying our coarse black pepper and then sprinkling on some of this Fiesta seasoning all salt for an overnight dry brine. I should mention the brisket here just before the trim was just shy of 14 pounds. So I think this is going to be a representative challenge in terms of the normal size brisket. It's not like I'm cheating and going for, you know, a 6-7 pound mini brisket. This is a full packer right in this sort of sweet spot range of what many are cooking on their Kamado style grills to get a great result. I'm gonna take a minute to thank Seeds DS01 for sponsoring today's video. And if you, like me at the beginning of the year, perhaps say, James, I don't know what DS01 Daily Symbiotic is. Let me give you a crash course as well as some of the very real and practical benefits that I've already benefited from starting my trial over a month ago and why I am onto my refill kit. Seeds DS01 Daily Symbiotic is a broad spectrum probiotic and prebiotic formulated with 24 clinically and scientifically studied strains for whole body benefits, including gut, skin, and heart health. As a lover of great barbecue, you'd naturally think I was first drawn to Seeds DS01 for some of the digestive health and benefits. It's actually a little bit more than that with the help of my doctor now that I'm in my mid-40s. Some of the other benefits in terms of cardiovascular health, managing cholesterol, and overall immune health benefits were actually what helped me connect to Seeds DS01 in the first place. There are 3 areas that appealed to me most, including the digestive health for enjoying great barbecue, as well as the immune, and for me, most importantly, the cardiovascular health. Some of the biggest benefits that I noticed were actually on my trip. So I started my seed supply just before the family trip that today's brisket is about, and I used my travel vial to take it with me for our extended vacation. So we went down to Nashville, Outer Banks, North Carolina, and Williamsburg, Virginia before coming home. But it was actually on the last leg of the journey when I ran out of my first month's supply that some of the health benefits became even more clear versus what I noticed right away, particularly on the digestive front after a few weeks of being on the road and sampling some great barbecue restaurants day after day. So whether you're like me and getting a little bit of a nudge from your family physician to help improve your cholesterol, and or you're just naturally curious and been checking out products, I'll put a link down below that you can get more information on Seeds DS01 Daily Symbiotic and find out if there is a benefit that might be in line with your particular health goals. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out the Save 25% coupon code. I'll put all the details down in the description. Thanks again to Seed for sponsoring today's video. Now, back to the action. In terms of our setup, like I've done before with the pulled pork, where I've gone from a cold smoke to a hot smoke, we're gonna start the same way here with nothing else inside of our Kamado Joe other than the pellet tube smoker. Load that up with pellets and set off to do our cold smoke. In order to make sure I'm not getting any heat, I put some deflector plates on the X accessory ring to, again, just make sure that all we're getting is smoke, no cooking, no heat. And in the pulled pork video, I did that for upwards of 2 hours. But given the time constraints, my 8 hours includes everything that I do from a cold smoke to a hot smoke. And so I'm gonna cap that somewhere around 90 minutes is the game plan to make sure that I have plenty of time for the hot smoke setup. The hot smoke setup, I'm going to use the Dojo accessories. This is the maximum airflow that I've been able to achieve on any Kamado setup as I get the benefit of the heat rolling over. And so to do that, we fill up our basket with charcoal. I'm gonna add a couple wood chunks into my kick ash can, as well as the bottom of my charcoal basket. And then once I use the Grill Blazer grill gun, get a nice hot fire going, I'm gonna sneak in 1 extra piece of smoking wood while the grill is coming up to temperature. There's no other heat in the grill, and so for this first stage, our bottom vent will be all the way open. On something like the Dojo setup, our top vent is completely closed since we're getting the venting from the Dojo, but if you weren't using the Dojo, your top vent would be all the way open, and this is going to give us clean dirty smoke. I've developed, this question comes up so often, a smoking wood guide for Kamado style grills. It's important not to follow. Like Cooper and others have great advice for offset smoking, but when I do dirty smoke on my offset, like I show you here on my Smoke North Echo, even though the top damper is almost completely shut, there is always open, visible flame. This is something you get away with on an offset smoker because there's a large volume of air capacity to move, and even a tight damper, you can still get away with dirty smoke in the temperatures around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You try that in a Kamado style grill and you're just getting a creosote. This is not good dirty smoke. So the best alternative that I found to that is using something like the pellet tube smoke, where again we are venting with the vent all the way open to give us a little supplemental smoke, and then exactly what we did with our setup here, we're going to add some wood chunks on the bottom of our basket, get a nice hot fire going, add another piece of wood. That's going to give us the benefit of that smoke while our vents can be all the way open, or venting properly. We're not going to get any creosote issues. And then I've added some supplemental wood to start in the bottom of my kick ash can, and then as we go throughout our cook, I can add additional smoking wood chunks as needed. And the benefit of the kick ash can, you'll see it doesn't really sit on the bottom. This is so there's room for expansion and contraction metal without putting any pressure on our ceramics, but this also acts like a bit of an insulated heat soak, if you will, in terms of being able to combust whatever we add nice and clean. And the surface area of collecting our ash is much larger. The stock system by far is the easiest way of adding wood chips and chunks, but if we use the original grates, all the ash and things like that get funneled down into there, it can sort of limit the amount of space that we have for wood chunks and airflow without the ash starting to smother whatever it is that we're adding. So if you haven't had success getting this to burn in your Kamado Joe, try removing those wings. It's optional. They do a great job, better than any other stock Kamado system, but the ash concentration can be a limiting factor in terms of those wood chunks combusting. Since I have the ash can, that's no problem. Every time that I throw a nice chunk in there, it combusts right away, perhaps because the insulation or the extra airflow, it just makes it that much easier. So now that you're all caught up on the game plan, let's fire up our grill and get to work and see if we can pull this off in T-minus 8 hours. Well, it's got to be way too early into the cook. According to the meter, we are only 30 minutes into our actual cook, and I'm already starting to have second thoughts about my strategy of potentially wasting an hour in the cold smoke, as we are down to 6 hours and 1 minute left. But I know in the past, I'm going to trust the plan here that the Dojo moves 4x more convection airflow than any other setup inside of a Kamado Joe, including the slow roller. So I'm going to trust in previous experience and speed of the Dojo moving convection air, as well as trying that position higher up in the dome. And fingers crossed we don't sail way past when we actually need this brisket done. But for now, I'm going to keep pacing nervously around the backyard. I'll see you a little bit later on when I have an update. Well, there's just over 2 hours left, and I have good news and bad news. So the good news, I just took a peek and the bark looks amazing. Like, this is what absolutely blows me away about the Dojo, is in just a couple hours on a Kamado style grill, I can get a bark that looks as if it's coming off of an offset smoker. So that is the good news. The bad news, according to the meter chart, is I'm sitting stuck in the stall just below 160 degrees Fahrenheit, where I'm almost at right now. And we have over 40 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature to gain and less than 2 hours to do it. So I think we are in the spot where I need to choose between wrap, foil boat, and or paper wrap. And so the pros and cons of each one. The boat is going to protect from the bottom, is what I would normally use in almost all of my Kamado cooks. But looking at the bottom up in the higher position here, I don't think the bottom is at risk of being overdone. So the boat maybe isn't the key to our next step. The full foil wrap is going to be my absolute fastest option. But as good as the bark looks, I'm not sure it could sacrifice being completely wrapped in foil. This is near offset quality, but it's not offset quality in the sense of it's fully crunchy and at risk of being overdone if I were to leave it. So I'm not sure, again, steaming it in full foil wrap is what I want to do. So I'm leaning to my least common used option in a Kamado style grill, which is going for a paper wrap. So this is going to give us the benefit of being sort of like a blanket fully wrapped, and it'll cook quicker, but the paper will breathe and it'll allow the bark to develop on all sides, bottom as well as top. So I think that's my go-to approach, but we will live and die by the sword in about 2 hours time and find out if that is the right choice. Well, as you can tell, time is nearly out. We're just under 30 minutes remaining. And if I show you the side by side of the countdown and the meter graph, both have us finishing nearly exactly on time. So I've started to not be as anxious about whether or not I'm going to be able to finish this brisket in time, but the nerves are now shifting to whether or not this brisket is going to be any good, especially since the coming in hot nearly right to the finish line. So as you can tell, I'm now riding along at 340 degrees on the dome. So I'm gonna bump this up a little bit further and try and get this brisket to be probe tender and start to let it cool down and rest before we slice into it. Otherwise, we just slice into it, we're gonna lose all of that juiciness. That's not a good idea. So we'll find out in exactly 27 minutes if we are able to pull off nearly the impossible Texas style brisket in under 8 hours on a Kamado Joe. I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, we're at 12 minutes to go and the meter says that we are at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, or at least where I placed the probe, which is in the center of the point end and the flat. So I'm just going to use my Chef's Temp X10 to get a bit of a probe feel. I'm hoping that we are nearly there, both sides of our brisket. Otherwise, I've only got about 11 minutes now to make up the difference. But let's poke through my paper here and get a sense for how we are at tightness once we don't have the paper grabbing. So I'm seeing 203, 204 degrees Fahrenheit. As you can see there, it's still feeling almost like there's an invisible hand inside the brisket sort of holding that on. Now the paper is obviously holding that a little bit more, but I think I'm going to use some of the 11 minutes that I have left. Check the flat. So just like normal, we're about 207. Ouch, oh, it's getting hot. I'm going to use the hold feature. If you don't know what that is, by the way, you can hit that button and remove it without keeping your hand in the hot grill. So we're about 206, 207 degrees in the flat, and I think I need a few more of our 11 minutes. So I'll rejoin you. Going to let this take all of the heat. I'm looking, I'm not cooking, right? Get that dome closed, and I'll take it off right before our deadline and see if we've got a probe tender brisket. All right, we're cutting this close. We have exactly a minute left. So let's get another feel on our point end. And unlike before, that's a much better sign. We're now, if I let go of the probe, it's falling down into the brisket. That looks good. Check our flat. And outside of the paper grabbing on, that actually feels the same where I let go and the probe is falling. 48 seconds, 47 seconds. Let's get this off. Close that up, shut down our vents. Boy, I didn't get around quick enough. It just ran out right on the dot, and I can assure you, there's the alarm going off, that we actually got this off. So we are right at, on the dot, the 3 o'clock deadline that I gave myself. Now, to find out if I should be kicking myself for the 90 minutes of trying to apply the Texas style pulled pork method where I use Barre Barbecue's cold smoke. If that was 90 minutes, I should have let the brisket cook versus going for the cold smoke and the hot smoke. We'll find out. I think we just are going to make it in the nick of time, at least from a time, but to find out if we've actually cooked a proper Texas style brisket in the time constraints that we have, I'll rejoin you in a few minutes once this is rested down and we can slice into it. All right, moment of truth. I've removed our brisket from the wrapping paper, had a little bit of leftover tallow to pour on the board, and now we find out if we've got ourselves a good brisket or not. I will say the bark looks fantastic. That jiggle is actually pretty fantastic, but none of that matters if everything else from here goes downhill. Let's find out. Let's take a look. I don't know if it's better in the light or out of the light, but what I'm seeing is nice smoke ring top and bottom. I don't want to squeeze, but there is just juices galore sort of running down in between our seam. So far, that looks pretty good. Do a cross section of our point. So our flat is holding up under its own weight. Whoop, if I don't drop it. Easily flopping. That's good. See how it does on the tug, and easily coming apart. So That's pretty good for tenderness. I was concerned that that would pull a little bit tighter, but that's taking next to no effort. We might be in luck. Let's taste. All right, moment of truth. Cheers. Well, our flat, you can't get more tender than that and still have it hold together. Fold over the finger, hold up under its own weight, flop, and come apart in your mouth that easy. That's a fantastic flat. The fat cap, I was a little bit nervous, but also excited about trying the higher position. I think that's a real winner. That came from a members live. I go live once a month to talk to members, and a member improved upon my invention here with the Dojo for a smoking accessory. Said, hey James, if you install it on the higher rack, you can have no problem fitting a drip pan underneath, as well as get more of that smoke rolling right over the top, as well as the heat in the dome. And that comes through on the fat cap, and there was absolutely no burning or shredding on the bottom. So I'm gonna call that a winner. Let's dive into our point before we unpack everything else. Cheers. Wow. There's no way this should be this good with the time constraints that we imposed on it. Now, obviously, if I were to do this again, I would remove the needing to have this done for 5 o'clock, pack it up in a Ziploc bag, get it in our camper, and hit the road, because with a little bit of extra time, I think we could have got the fat rendered out a little bit better in the point end, but it doesn't come through in the taste. Now, speaking of the taste, what am I getting? A little bit of heat on the back of the mouth from the pepper. The bark is fantastic. The fat cap is fantastic. I'm gonna give those two, Kamado brisket here, bark and fat cap render. These are 10 out of 10 for Kamado. This is fantastic. The flat, this is very good. I think we're gonna give this maybe a 9 out of 10. The point is where we suffer a little bit. So I think we're maybe down in about a 7 out of 10, but nonetheless, remarkable. And all in all, if I think about the flavor, we're between like 8 and a 9. Let's call it an 8.5 out of 10, despite the time constraint. So what's really propping this up? The bark is fantastic. The smoke is as good as it gets on a Kamado style grill. So the combination of cold smoke, as well as burning those wood splits nice and clean in the charcoal basket, as well as everything that we added into the kick ash can. This is pretty stunning. This is absolutely, I'm blown away still that this was able to be done in 8 hours. And then my nitpicks, if I were to nitpick in terms of holding this to the high bar, what we gained in record time, perhaps when I bumped up the temperature and wrapping it, this is where we pay the price a little bit in terms of the intermuscular fat on the point end and the thickest part. It could be a little bit better in my books, but I don't think anybody at camp is going to have a single complaint about this. So to answer the question where we started, can we cook a proper Texas style brisket on a Kamado Joe and throw in the variable of it all has to be done in 8 hours or less? I'm gonna say 2 thumbs up, absolutely. That's it for today. I'm James Smoking That Barbecue signing off. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Oh.